going to read a few poems from Life on Mars, and now I understand what's happening. Before I was speaking to, I think, Guillermo, saying, we'll stand together, I'll read the poem in English, you wait, and then you read it in Spanish, but he's in the ether. So I think we're going to be doing this together. This is a poem called Cathedral Kitsch, and it is the product of having traveled a lot and visited cathedrals all over not all over the world, but in the many different places where I've been, and feeling like there's a lot that remains similar from place to place, that says a great deal, I think, about who we as humans are. Cathedral Kitsch. Does God love gold? Does he shine back at himself from walls like these, leafed in the earth's softest wealth? Women light candles, pray into their fistful of beads. Cameras spit human light into the vast, holy dark. And what glistens back is high up and cold. I feel man here, the same wish that named the planets. Man, with his shoes and tools, his insistence to prove we exist, just like God, in the large and the small, the great and the frayed, in the chords that rise from the tall brass pipes, and the chorus of crushed cans someone drags over cobbles in the secular street. This book is, in part, it's my attempt to imagine or speculate about the future. And so I turn to science fiction in many of the poems. They're poems that are thinking about what the world or what the universe will look like in, some distant future if we don't change anything about what we're doing now. And I think that's the function of a genre like science fiction. And then, while I was working on those poems, my father became very ill and passed away quite quickly. And so my interest took a swerve. And I found myself trying to imagine where he had gone to, where in the universe the afterlife takes place. And so a lot of the poems, kind of like the one I just read, even are thinking about God in different terms, struggling to find a more large and sufficiently complex version of the God that I grew up with, so that I could feel safe with both my parents there and whatever that space is. So this is a poem that is imagining the figure of God as an it. This is called It and Company. We are a part of it, not guests. Is it us or what contains us? How can it be anything but an idea, something teetering on the spine of the number I? It is elegant, but coy. It avoids the blunt ends of our fingers as we point. We have gone looking for it everywhere, in Bibles and bandwidth, blooming like a wound from the ocean floor. Still, it resists the matter of false versus real. Unconvinced by our zeal, it is unappeasable. It is like some novels, vast and unreadable. The soul. The voice is clean, has heft, like stones dropped in still water, or tossed one after the other at a low wall, chipping away at what pushes back, not always making a dent, but keeping at it. And the silence around it is a door, punched through with light, a garment that attests to breasts, the privacy between thighs. The body is what we lean toward, tensing as it darts, dancing away. But it's the voice that enters us, even saying nothing over and over absently to itself. I think this next poem, it's proof of what I've always known about poetry, which is sometimes you start out talking about what's on your mind, only to find your poem pulling you toward the direction of what is actually in your heart. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I write, to discover what I'm feeling, to discover what's truly at stake. So this is a poem I started writing one afternoon because I was sitting at my desk. I lived at the time in Brooklyn, New York, in an apartment with upstairs neighbors who had kids. And I was sitting at my desk trying to write, and I heard the kids screaming upstairs and jumping, making all this noise, and I couldn't think. And suddenly they became the subject of my poem, or so I thought. And then I think the subject of my poem became something else. I like to say when I read this poem that I now have 3 children of my own, and I realize those kids were very well behaved. The universe as primal scream. "5 p.m. on the nose. They open their mouths and it rolls out, high, shrill, and metallic. First the boy, then his sister. Occasionally, they both let loose at once, and I think of putting on my shoes to go up and see whether it is merely an experiment their parents have been conducting upon the good crystal, which must surely lie shattered to dust on the floor. Maybe the mother is still proud of the 4 pink lungs she nursed to such might. Perhaps if they hit the magic decibel, the whole building will lift off and will ride to glory like Elijah. If this is it, if this is what their cries are cocked toward, let the sky pass from blue to red to molten gold to black. Let the heaven we inherit approach. Whether it is our dead in Old Testament robes, or a door opening onto the roiling infinity of space, whether it will bend down to greet us like a father, or swallow us like a furnace, I'm ready to meet what refuses to let us keep anything for long, what teases us with blessings, bends us with grief. Wizard, thief, the great wind rushing to knock our mirrors to the floor, to sweep our short lives clean. How mean our racket seems beside it. My stereo on shuffle, the neighbor chopping onions through a wall. All of it just a hiccup against what may never come for us. And the kids upstairs, still at it, screaming like the dawn of man, as if something they have no name for has begun to insist upon being born. few poems from my most recent book, Weight in the Water. And this is a book that's also thinking about America. I have a lot of questions and a lot of anxieties about the country I belong to, and so I write about them. And history in this book is the lens that I often use to process those questions. I'll read you some poems that are rooted in the present from the end of the book. And let's see what year. Annunciation. I feel ashamed, finally, of our magnificent paved roads, our bridges slung with steel, our vivid glass, our tantalizing lights, everything enhanced, rehearsed, a trick. I've turned old. I ache most to be confronted by the real, by the cold, the pitiless, the bleak, by the red fox crossing a field after snow, by the broad shadow scraping past overhead. My young son, eyes set at an indeterminate distance, ears locked, tuned inward, caught in some music only he has ever heard. Not our cars, our electronic haze, not the piddling bleats and pings that cause some hearts to race. Ashamed, like a pebble, hard and small, hoping only to be ground to dust by something large and strange and cruel. This is a poem called Refuge, and it came out of a conference that I participated in at Princeton University where I teach. The topic was forced migration, and it was a conference where people who studied migration were speaking, but there were also people who work with faith-based organizations to help resettle recent immigrants or asylum seekers. And there were also, and I think most importantly, people who had migrated to the US out of need because of the political situations where they live to seek refuge. And so they were able to speak to their experience of making that journey, in many cases their experience of detention. And it was a moving and I think enlightening couple of days. And again, the people who expressed the most gratitude on those panels were the people who were, Americans who had been serving the community of immigrants. And this is a poem that became a thought experiment. I know it's hard for many people to get their head around immigration, and I thought, well, you can practice. You can practice looking at the world differently. So this is a poem in which I do that. It's called Refuge. Until I can understand why you fled, why you are willing to bleed, why you deserve what I must be willing to cede. Let me imagine you are my mother in Montgomery, Alabama, walking to campus rather than riding the bus. I know what they call you, what they try to convince you lack. I know your tired ankles, the sudden thunder of your laugh. Until I want to give you what I myself deserve, let me love you by loving her. Your sister in a camp in Turkey, 16, deserving of everything. Let her be my daughter, who has curled her neat hands into fists, insisting nothing is fair, and I have never loved her. Naomi, lips set in a scowl, young heart ransacking its cell. Let me lend her passion to your sister and love her for her living rage, her need for more and now and all. Let me leap from sleep if her voice sounds out, afraid, from down the hall. I have seen men like your father walking up Harrison Street now that the days are getting longer. Let me love them as I love my own father, whom I phoned once from a valley in my life to say what I feared I'd never adequately said. Voice choked, stalled, hearing the silence spread around us like weather. What would it cost me to say it now to a stranger's father, walking home to our separate lives together? I will close with this last poem, which is, it's a poem that I wrote in an attempt to write a new myth. I think it's a great exercise for those of you who write poetry. Write the myth that you think we need right now. This is called An Old Story. We were made to understand it would be terrible. Every small want, every niggling urge, every hate swollen to a kind of epic wind, livid the land and ravaged like a rageful dream, the worst in us having taken over and broken the rest utterly down. A long age passed, when at last we knew how little would survive us, how little we had mended or built that was not now lost. Something large and old awoke. And then our singing brought on a different manner of weather. Then animals long believed gone crept down from trees. We took new stock of one another. We wept to be reminded of such color. Thank you very much.